host, Dr. Lawrence James. I got your name right this time, bruh.
I know. And look, I was going to sidebar us because you wrote a beautiful piece about your three names. And I was like, I got to get this man to talk about Kevin versus KP versus Kazike. But we might have to hold that for another episode. But I was like,
Another time. Yeah.
we need to discuss. We need to discuss. How you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing well. I'm glad today is one of those days. You know how it is, just things are running and gunning. But we had I think some really good topics for us to discuss today.
Yeah.
And today we said this last week, and we're actually following through. We're last week we talked about Black love and Cesar Chavez, but today we're going to talk about the manosphere and manhood. Right.
Manhood, yeah.
We're going to talk about the Supreme Court. This little thing that happened yesterday with the president decided to show up at the proceedings.
Right.
Talk about birthright citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
Never has the president ever done that.
No.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
And then this is something we've been sitting on for a while. We just haven't gotten to. Hopefully we'll do it today, is the great rebrand era. This is about DEI and how companies have decided to rebrand it to other things. And then our side eye is back to the Supreme Court, but talking about the decision that came out earlier this week on the gender non-affirming care that was started in Colorado, but impacts like over 20 plus states across the country.
Yeah.
And the decision they came up with, which is interesting to say the least. But before we get into it, I wanted to do one of our djembe cards. And again, we're going to start with the grounding card. And without me looking at it, I'm not doing that one.
Everybody can be like, what was it? Like,
we'll do that another day, based on our conversation earlier. Right. All right, here we go. Speaking my truth might look like blank. Speaking my truth may look like blank. You want to go first?
Yeah. Speaking my truth might look like quiet resistance. It's crazy because I was literally just had a conversation with somebody this morning about this. We don't always share or say all that we're thinking. And sometimes it's like, you know what the scene is, you know how it's going, you know what the culture it suggests. And you drop a word here or there because you know the game that's being played. And rather, you don't confront it directly, beat it up, but you kind of throw in a little jab here, a little hook there. But it becomes clear, mostly to yourself, but also to your audience, like, I ain't with that. So, sometimes I find, maybe for my personality, that's the most effective way, KP, for me to address things that I'm not really down with.
Right. When you said that, I couldn't help it, but I was like, homie, don't play that.
Homie, don't play that. I'm like, come on.
I dated myself, but it is a kind of quiet resistance I hear you talking about, where you gotta sit back and you're like, And it doesn't have to be dramatic, right?
Don't have to be dramatic. Right.
Sit back.
Look, I might have an earring, but I'm not pulling out my earring and doing all that. It's like, I'm not so sure about that, Bob.
And the thing is, it's still your truth, right? Speaking my truth might look like, I don't know. It's speaking my truth. Oftentimes, it's through my writing. When I post things, whether it was the Jasmine Crockett, James Tallarico dialogue and being part of that. Sometimes the best thing I can do is just put something out there and just speak my truth. And if someone sees it, great. Because I'm always battling this idea of who cares what I have to say.
Yeah.
And so, and it's really not about, who cares or doesn't care, but it's like sharing ideas. And, there was a sister one time says, I'm really glad that you're talking about things like, Black, health issues. Because a lot of times it's not being talked about. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so I'm glad you're sharing information about your experience, if nothing else, so other folks know, So at the time it was around colon cancer. My grandmother unfortunately passed to it, and I actually had my own colonoscopy. but
Mm-hmm.
talked about it online because I was like,
Yeah.
black men, we got to go get our colonoscopy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what speaking my truth is. It's like speaking about my experiences and in hopes that it may be of use for someone. And if not, it's all good.
Right. Yeah.
But that's kind of that's what so it's instead of like fight the power,
Power rangers.
march, which I'll do that, but
Right.
I'm more like just tell a story.
Yeah. I love that though, because I think that I think we get caught up in everybody has to be Dr. King and Malcolm and, all that. And it's the small stories that each of us tells or perspectives that we bring to the table that really can make, such a difference. Not only to ourselves, and it's twofold too. Because when you tell that story, when you write, it's healthy for you because you're getting some stuff off your chest, if you will. You're expressing what's inside of you, so that's healthy. But also, it may resonate with somebody, or you help somebody. What I love even about our conversations is they build off of each other. And so the cool part is you say something, I say something, we say something, and it just kind of builds a thing. And it doesn't end up where we started, but it goes somewhere, and you go, man, that was a damn good thought, or like that was provocative. I learned something, so I love that. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? Getting
absolutely.
people to talk, right?
Getting
So we
people.
got 3 topics, bro. I feel like we should start with the great rebrand since we've pushed it off a couple
Okay.
of weeks. Um, I don't know. I feel like this is a really important topic because, as you know, I've been working in the diversity, equity, inclusion space. I feel like I have to say it out loud. You say DEI, people, have a reaction to it. I'm like,
Throwing this
no,
over your
diversity,
head
equity,
right
inclusion.
now, it's like,
And we already know that companies have done a great kind of rebrand process, which started with taking out words like diversity,
yeah,
equity, in some places inclusion as well,
absolutely.
because they didn't want to offend people.
Hmm.
And so what you see is this shift towards focusing on words like culture
Hmm.
and belonging, which are cool words. They're not bad words, but
Right.
culture, I remember having to have a conversation with someone in an organization because my area was DEI and theirs was culture. And the
Hmm.
way we distinguish between the two is that culture really focused on everybody, which was nice, but typically culture work oftentimes would leave out the experiences maybe of women or people of color or international folks if you were a globally based US company.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so while yes, culture focused on everybody, sometimes people were being left out
Hmm.
or not attended to as well. And so that's where DI came in to kind of make sure that we kind of honed in. But we've kind of now when you see some of these job descriptions, it's culture and belonging. Or the other one is belonging and talent acquisition.
Hmm. Hmm.
Even though they can't have the goals they had before,
No.
they can, generic. Like we're trying to get more women, but we don't have a goal around it
Right.
necessarily like we did before.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice if we had more women.
Well, and I think that the real challenge is that they're concerned because the federal government through the Department of Justice is literally going after organizations in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We have our attorney general who goes after organizations, schools, principals,
Fascist.
um, you know, basically saying you can't do this anymore because it's making little white boys and girls feel uncomfortable.
Feel
I'm
uncomfortable.
like, okay, so
Everyday
what do
life.
you?
You're like, okay, yeah, like we're all uncomfortable. No, but you're absolutely right. And I think Kim Paxton, and the Republican leadership in the state of Texas, but also Ron DeSantis has done very similar things. Um, Aside from what the president is doing, that has made it difficult, if not impossible, to do DEI the way we had. And I have watched companies in my consulting practice just kill themselves bending over backwards to take DEI out of their language. And it's just this weird exercise because they're also trying to maintain the goals without having the goals.
Mm-hmm.
I had one client, they changed the name, um, and I don't even remember what they called it, but I was laughing because I actually said to the leader, I said, I don't think you actually understand what you just did. He's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, your new name actually suggests, because it was something about, was belonging for all or something like that. And I said, you're actually arguing for global culture change within your organization. I was like, I don't know if that's what you intended. I was like, it's a great thing. I was like,
Mhm.
but your name implies that you're actually going to not just do DEI, but you're actually going to look at the organizational culture writ large, and you're going to change it. Um, I have this belief personally that um, if culture change, if we were really looking at the culture of an organization, which is in this country based in white American culture, we call it business culture, but business culture in America really is white culture with all white cultural rules. So, are you interested in dismantling that, which is what your new name suggests? Um, which I don't think that's actually what you intended, but if you are, great. Let's go do that. So, unlike you, I actually stopped doing DEI work well before this, in part because I was like, the real culprit is sort of white, the white culture that underlies American business, and dismantling that so that there, not that I believe meritocracy is real anyway, but if there was such a thing, that we were all on the same playing fields. And how do you get that to work? And the irony, and there's actually research that even supports this, is the rules around white culture actually don't benefit most white people, including
No.
white men. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like you're perpetuating a system that literally does not work for 3/4 of the people. Now, we can say those at the top are happy, and so maybe in that sense, which is a very capitalistic idea, yeah, it may work in that way, but it really doesn't work for 3/4 of your population, and 3/4 of your population, by the way, actually don't want to be a part of that culture.
Right. It does, because it doesn't resonate with them. It
It doesn't
doesn't
resonate.
benefit them. I
No.
mean, hence why I think you see politicians now who are fighting against this,
Hmm.
talking about the contrast between billionaires and regular everyday
Yeah,
people, because they represent that top tier percentage of
that one
folks
percent
who
or whatever,
seem to be a bit out of touch.
out of touch.
So if you're with an organization and you have a CEO who is near or very wealthy in some way, near billionaire type of person, the question for me is how do you build a bridge between those two different ways of seeing the
Yeah,
world? I mean, yes, you have to attend to your stockholders, right? But you can't leave your people who are making minimum wage or whatever out of the conversation
out
as
of the
well. And now, all too often, that's what's happening. And I think that's the whole point behind DEI. But if you're going to focus on belonging, then okay, how does everyone belong in this organization?
exactly.
And how do we tap into those conversations? How do you make sure the CEO and other leadership are having conversations with everyday folks within their organizations or in the community? And I think fundamentally, anyone who's of any worth as a leader, they're doing that already.
I,
That's why I'm a firm believer that even though they're trying to be anti DEI and they're saying DEI is dead, for a lot of organizations, it's so baked into what they're doing, there's no way that they would get. I mean, like, there's some leaders I've worked with. They're like, the idea that they wouldn't be going out talking to their teams and their people to figure out know what's going on. They're like, hey, I couldn't do that.
could run my business.
It literally ruined my business. And so why would I stop doing? So it's more than just, we're not going to forget our veterans, and we're not going to forget the women who actually benefit, white women particularly benefit from this more than anyone else. We're not going to talk about the white men who actually were impacted by admissions because they found out they were actually, for more gender parity, they were letting more white men into the school than they would have if they were doing it just off
Right.
of their application.
Exactly.
And so I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are seeing and understanding that whether it's DEI, belonging, inclusion, culture, if we're going to be a really solid business, these approaches are things that we still need to do. And they're still doing it. They're
Yeah.
just not calling it
Yeah. Yeah.
DEI.
And same for me. Like all of my clients um, have killed themselves to change the names. And not one of them has actually said, we're going to change our behavior in real time. And some of them are glad that they don't have the mandates
Right.
for DEI,
Right.
in terms of social responsibility. But in large part, the behavior on the ground hasn't changed. I mean, if you look at all the stuff around inclusive leadership, um, all of that, I won't say all of it, much of that work really comes out of a space of equality, diversity, if you will, sort of honestly, African American cultural references,
Mm-hmm.
Ubuntu, and things like that, that are about collectivism, we ness, all those ideas are really what undergirds inclusive leadership. So people are engaging in it and they're seeing the power that it
Mm-hmm.
brings for, at the end of the day, productivity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they're not going away from it. You know, I mean, they're morphing it by name, but not by behavior. And I think that's the thing we really have to start looking at is, yes, the name is important, and I do think it's important, and the behavior also matters, right? We've seen it. You know, George Floyd died, and everybody put dollars into diversity, but were they actually engaged in the behaviors and actions that were going to create a more diverse and equitable environment within their organizations? And we could argue many of them were not. You know, it was face valid actions. So
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that is it was great to have these kind of aspiring goals to hire X percentage of people to be, whether it be people of color, women. But what you ran into is constant complaints about, well, we don't have enough people of that type in the pipeline,
in the pipeline, yep.
or we don't have enough people who do this thing, engineering, you name it,
Mm-hmm.
sales, marketing. We just don't have enough of those folks. So that's why we're struggling there. And I would always give them examples of companies like, um, what's the name of it? Dating site. I forget the Buzz, not Buzz, but
Or Bumble, Bumble.
Bumble. Yes, I knew it was a B. Where they had no problem finding women who are engineers
No,
who worked with an organization to
no,
create the kind of things. They had no problem finding women who are leaders because this is a women-centered
so,
app, right?
exactly,
Right,
right,
and technology. But they needed to have women who understood the technology to do the work that was necessary. They had no problem finding the talent.
right,
But for some reason over here, they're like, well, we just don't. No, let's talk about the fact that your people don't know anybody.
right.
I mean, I literally sometimes I would think in my head, I mean, are all of them incels and they have grief and frustration with women?
Right.
And since they don't know any women, they don't know where to go hire them.
That's right.
Because if they are, then that's the problem. You
That's
need
the
to
problem.
have more relationships with people in this space.
Yeah. But
And I
no,
would just get frustrated.
yeah, and it is frustrating because you're like, you have a sourcing problem. You have a talent sourcing problem, and you're only looking at, you know, Harvard and Yale, blah blah blah. You know, we'll talk about the Supreme Court. It is not happenstance that the Supreme Court, 8 out of the 9, all either went to Harvard or Yale, and Coach Barrett, I think,
Mm-hmm.
went to Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Those numbers aren't by happenstance,
No.
right? And historically, that has been where these people have come to, because that now is not meritocratic, but that's a tributary. You only are looking for lawyers who went to Harvard and Yale, you know, because the answer says, oh, we had good Supreme Court justices who came out of that space. Guess what? There's some damn good lawyers who went to Stanford, who went to Michigan, who went to UT, who clearly are capable
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
doing that job,
Yeah.
right? But you ain't looking at them. You know, you've gate kept the Supreme Court to say, well, the only people who can get through the gate have gone to some Ivy League school, and specifically 2 Ivy League schools, right? So if you're not finding women, if you're not finding Black folks, if you're not finding other people of color, it's mostly because you ain't looking. Um, you know, I'm gonna keep going to the 5 institutions that we've been to get our talent, and so therefore, guess what? You're gonna keep getting 5 white boys for the job.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
tell
And
me,
the
are
thing
you
is,
really
it's like,
interested in creating a more diverse workforce? Um,
right, right,
because you need to be more creative.
right. I mean, whether it's your HBCUs, your women's-centered organizations, and institutions and universities, these are places that are just bubbling over with talent.
Bubbling.
And oftentimes, and I know what you're paying for when you go to Harvard, and you're paying for connections,
I,
right?
I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you want to make connections in the world, go to Harvard or Yale.
Because the truth is, I mean, you look at the level of training they
Right.
receive. I'm not saying they're not excellent. What I'm saying is that you see that excellence in other spaces,
That's
right? even for us as psychologists, I remember, I went to the University of Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought Georgia was a great program. It was ranked number 3 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but for some reason we put Columbia
Yeah.
up here.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota was up
Yep.
here. And so I'd go hang out with some folks who went to Columbia and Minnesota. I'm like, these folks ain't
They ain't all that.
different. I'm not saying they're not smart. I'm
No,
saying
they ain't all
they
that.
ain't all that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I
Exactly.
remember this. What's that brother's name? He's at University of Houston, and I forget. He was part of the Association of Black Psychologists, and he does a lot of stuff around brain functioning and all this other stuff. He's based out of U of H. That dude is brilliant,
Mm-hmm.
brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he spent some time at Harvard or Yale, but
Okay.
he's over at the University of Houston. He's doing.
Mm.
I'm not knocking U of H. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is that here's this brilliant dude who's doing really
Right.
wonderful research, who's doing
Mm-hmm.
things in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he should be shunned because he went to
Right.
this school versus another school.
Right. Right. The pedigree doesn't fit, and so therefore, there's an assumption about talent. I'll tell you a quick funny story. So I was telling you off air. I used to spend a lot of time in San Antonio. So I used to work with the utility there, and one of the young ladies who worked there, I won't use her name, mostly because I don't remember it. Had actually gotten into Harvard.
Mm.
Young Latina got into Harvard. She ended up not going.
Mm.
In part, single mom. Her mom got ill.
Mm.
She ended up going to a local college in San Antonio. And people would be like, well, she only went to this local college in San Antonio. I wonder how bright she is. And I'm like, and of course, I've talked to the lady, so I know what her pedigree, what she could have done and why she didn't. And I'm like, yeah, don't get it twisted. I'm like, she's the deal. I'm like, she has the pedigree. I was like, what you don't know is she got into Harvard. She chose not to go. And I can tell you, I know a lot of folks who've been that. And I know people who wouldn't have gotten into those schools for all kinds of reasons who are, to your point, absolutely brilliant, right? Their financial situations. And hell, I know people who are brilliant who never went to college.
Right. Right.
I'm like,
straight up.
That cat know more than I will ever know.
Right.
About all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, that sister, and I'm like, and you're like, oh, you didn't go to college. It's like, so, and this is my soapbox against this thing. We put way too much stock in intelligence, in business and in life, as if it's the end all and be all of living. I'm like, you need to be bright enough. Every CEO I've ever met, I'm like, 90% of them are not brilliant. They're not even close to being brilliant. I'm like, but they're bright enough.
Right. They're bright enough. And they know how to pick the right people.
And they know how to pick the right people, right? I mean, so, this overachievement notion that, sort of, frankly, white supremacy culture preaches to all of us who aren't white is a misnomer. It isn't actually real. You don't need to be that brilliant. You need to be bright enough. I mean, you can't walk in being stupid. But you don't need to be a Rhodes Scholar or a rocket scientist to do 90% of the jobs that are out there, So let's level set what's real, out in the world versus like this illusion. And it's an illusion that other people are putting on you. And we as Black folks have owned a lot of that when we're telling our kids, you gotta be twice as good as the white boy. I'm like, first of all, me and my cat were working last night on a paper we're calling "Leading in the Black Gaze." Well, I love it. We're down with it. We're gonna run with this, but it's about centering Blackness. Not centering whiteness. There are rules in white culture that actually don't benefit us. But if we centered in our own culture, there's brilliance within the culture and knowledge that we can, you be the best you can be.
Right.
Let's start with that as a premise. Not you got to be twice as good, because we don't really recognize what's the underlying stress that we also create for ourselves under the white gaze of having to be twice as good as white folk. It's like, so why are Black men dying at 60 and 50? Some of that is that. It's not all of it.
Yeah. Some of it. Yeah. And it's hard because the truth is you definitely have to work hard,
You got
but
to
do
work
you have to beat yourself in the process? Do you have to
exactly,
abuse yourself to the
exactly,
point where you have nothing left for your
right,
family, for your
right,
friends, community, and it
exactly.
serves no one when you approach it that way, and
Yes,
your quality of life is diminished as a result.
like gone,
So
gone.
yeah, go work hard, but
Go work hard, and it's
not
go work hard on the strategic things that make a difference. In my research on Black executives, one of the things we saw was um, the African Americans who made it to the top of organizations showed a couple of different characteristics. One was they demonstrated good critical thinking, strategic thinking skills. And so
hmm
you don't got to work hard on everything, but you do have to work hard and demonstrate strategic thinking capabilities.
yeah, right, right.
You do that, then you are seen as bright enough, capable enough to go to that next level, that VP, that SVP level. Like that's a part of the criteria. Um, Networked enough, organizationally savvy enough. These it's not everything, but it is these few things that really make a difference in terms of these perceptions of folks who are getting to the top. As a sidebar, it's one of the reasons why I hate to say this. Everybody's like, why are Indians catapulting to the top of organizations so quickly?
Mm.
They actually are demonstrating the strategic thinking ability. Not because every Indian is strategic, because they're not,
Right, right,
but
right. But they're showing that skill.
so like if you go and look half the corporations, their chief strategy officer is of Indian descent, and you're like, do they have some particular capability? I don't believe so, but I think they have recognized, they understand a part of this game is demonstrating those kinds of capabilities helps you to rise to the top of organizations,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
right? So,
I mean, well, it makes a lot of sense, and I guess part of me wants to move to the conversation because I think this is really important about the rebranding, and what I really hear us talking about is that there's really substance behind the work that we're trying to accomplish,
yeah.
well, regardless of what we call it. But it's fundamentally about our performance and how we
Mhm.
may tap into different talent that's represented
Yeah.
in every
And really
campus.
is and understand the game that you're participating in,
Right,
right? I mean, if you know the rules in any game, if you understand the rules of the game, you're more likely to succeed,
right,
right?
and
You
that's
have
half the problem.
these suites to know here are the levers that they are pulling and that they are looking at to say somebody is capable of being in these kinds of jobs. It's the cheat code. I mean, and to some degree, you and I understand. Here's what the cheat code is. It ain't actually working harder, right? It's working smarter in these. And there's only three. There's like three, four of those areas
Handful of spaces. Right,
that you need to
right.
demonstrate those skills and capabilities to be at least in the conversation.
Right. Because, whether you're really good at spreadsheets may or may not take you to the next level.
Yeah, and the answer is it won't. Nobody cares if you're good
The
at it
spreadsheets.
to be a VP or VP.
Well, let's move on to. I feel like we can get to the manosphere another time. I really want to spend some time talking about the birthright citizenship. And this was discussed yesterday because the Supreme Court was hearing
Mm.
cases around it. I don't know how much you heard about it, but there was a lot of pushback from the justices
Yeah.
asking
Did her
questions.
business.
Say again?
I said Katanji did her business.
Yes, you did. Yes, you
Katanji
did.
be out there
But
killing folks.
she's really good at what she does. I mean, I
She
love to see her because she's definitely talented. But you
is.
even had pushback from people like Roberts, who tends to be a little more on the conservative
Yeah.
side, saying basically really pushing back on this idea because what they're basically making an argument for is that when they came up with the 14th Amendment,
Right.
this is applied to basically former slaves and so how it's being used currently by people who are from China and other parts
Mm.
of the world, it's being misused or
Yeah.
abused. And so it doesn't make any sense. But Roberts, the way he pushed back was saying, but the Constitution is still the Constitution.
Constitution.
It's
Constitution.
still the world's changed, but the Constitution is still the
Right.
same.
Constitution
And
ain't
I'm like, kind of simple, but
it's
brilliant at the same time.
absolutely. Absolutely. Let me negate
And
all
it's
argument in one shot. The Constitution ain't changed, right? But I think what's insidious to me about all of this in MAGA world is the consistent poking at the Constitution, trying to, it's like water in a river, right? You're trying to erode the document by each of these tests. I don't even know that Trump and well, Trump's too stupid. I don't know that Stephen Miller actually cared about birthright citizenship as a concept. What he cared about was, can we poke holes in this document that everybody says is the underpinning of this nation? And if we can we do it, because it sows doubt and it actually weakens the fabric of the nation. To me, that's really what this is much more about than it is about birthright per se. And we're all up in arms about birthright because it's BS. But it's like there's also, to me, a bigger picture, which is why I think Ketanji is brilliant, because she actually was one of the few people who spoke to this idea, especially in the other case that we'll talk about a little bit later around gender affirming care. It's the consequence of the decision. So if the Supreme Court were to vote, 5-4 in favor of Trump, what they are saying is the Constitution doesn't matter.
Which is, to me, I'll be honest, I was thinking about this yesterday. I said, we have three branches of government for a reason, right? And they're supposed to work, and yeah, but I'll be honest, I'm concerned because it's like it seems so clearly written in the Constitution.
Yes.
So for them to be able to make any kind of changes in their interpretation is bewildering to me, because it's so clear. I mean, there's other parts of the Constitution that are a bit unclear, and so they've had to interpret it and give some clarity because it wasn't really clear.
Right.
Whereas this 14th Amendment is like, bruh, these Negroes right here and these other Negroes, these are the Negroes who's part of the country. And if you're not one of these, then you not. And I'm like, how clear could you be? And so for them to have an interpretation, and I guess that's why it was important to hear and listen to the case from the president's side, their arguments.
Yes.
And you're like, that's an interesting approach. But like you said, it's not really even about the argument anymore. It's about punching holes as much as they can, get people wasting time on this issue.
That's right.
Instead of focusing on other things. And so they just throw anything they can on the wall and see what sticks.
See what sticks. Right. I mean, there is no real philosophy behind all this stuff. It's like, let's, what do you say? Flood the zone. So they flooded the courts with a bunch of nonsense. And they're not even raising questions that are worthwhile to be considered. Because there are some things you're like, boy, that's a really worthwhile thing for us to be considered.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Most of this is like, there's no point in doing this. It's like, and you cry enough voter fraud as an example that he's been crying for 8 years. It's like, there is no evidence. And by the way, it's out of your jurisdiction. So it's like, no. And there are processes. And again, Trump and his people, I give them credit for this in a horrible way, have done a lot to dismantle process. And again, I think that's a part of it, because it's like, well, if there are no processes, guess what? We can do whatever the hell we want.
And I think that's part of the agenda, right? They've demonstrated that even if they don't get away with it eventually, they get away with it long enough to create havoc and disruption and chaos and death.
Chaos. And that last point you raised right there is so profound. And death. I mean, these things are literally killing people unnecessarily. We got people dying in Iraq for some very squishy idea that even the person who's articulating it can't articulate accurately. And you name it, Department of Education, environmental protections, all of these things that they are dismantling literally were put in place to save people's lives. And now we're going to kill people, insidiously.
And I was a little tentative about bringing in the manosphere, but I feel like this is connected to the manosphere conversation.
I think it is.
Because I feel like what we see in our government on this topic around birthright citizenship is the worst articulation of the problem around manosphere.
Yes.
And I think I shared with you when I first brought this topic up, because I had watched the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And what was most disturbing about watching this is that under all the bluster and
Mm-hmm.
gravitas and I don't care, was
Mm-hmm.
two things that came out. Number
Mm-hmm.
one, no one sees me.
No one
I'm
sees.
a man and I'm out here and no one really sees who I
Mm-hmm.
am. And number two, um, I'm a victim.
Yeah.
I'm a because I'm being they're coming after me. They don't like what I have to say, and so now I'm a victim because.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hold up, how did you become the victim? And you're saying some really fucked up stuff. And yeah, you should be held accountable. So this is, I mean, it's kind of like the Elon Musk, this idea that you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be held accountable for what you
Yes.
say.
That's right.
Yes, you can say whatever you say, bro.
Right. But there are
But there's going to be some things that people are going to push back on and say, that's
hold up.
fucked up.
Yeah, that's
You
too
shouldn't
much.
do that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And
No,
and that's the whole point, right?
yeah.
I mean, yeah, people they don't like what's the whole thing where people get I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with words. When you do something and people shut you down, um
Oh, cancel.
yeah, canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And people, and I get it, people don't like it because it
Right.
seems kind of unfair, it's uneven and blah, blah, blah. Oh, I mean, that's how our legal system works. It's uneven and unfair,
Mm-hmm.
but we use it because it's the best system we have available.
Yeah.
Same thing with, I think, council culture. I
Yeah.
think now, can it be shaped differently and moved
Sure.
around? Yeah. But that we use it because for a lot of folks, they had no other means
Yeah.
of having people be held accountable and responsible for their behavior. It wasn't until something got into the news that, I mean, there was how many black men have been shot and killed by police, but it wasn't until it got into the
Right.
news that, I guess we should prosecute these people.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, that whole manosphere conversation for me was oppressive. I mean, I actually watched the doc. I mean, I walked away from that being really like disturbed for hours and days afterward because I was like, oh, none of this is any kind of man that I would want to be, and somebody might be, well, you soft and you all that. Okay, let me be soft. Because these people are gross and disgusting, who spend all of their time abusing everyone. And underneath it, I remember the brother who the English guy who has the white mom. Beneath that, what I really saw was a very weak young man who had grown up, unfortunately, largely fatherless and directionless. One who didn't know how to be a man. And it was this convolution of sort of toxic masculinity and capitalism, right? Because the thing that made you a man, a la Donald Trump, is you got money, right?
It makes everything okay.
And makes everything okay. And so being hell-bent on having money, no matter how you get it, is okay. And it's like, and I've watched men, I do the corporate piece. I've watched men who make millions of dollars, who leave those jobs to go into their wonderful retirement, and they're dead in 2 years. So they spend all that time getting all that money, and they got nothing. And not only do they have nothing, but they don't have a family. Their kids won't talk to them. They ain't got no friends. That says something to me about what life is or is not. Because you can't spend all that money. And if you are spending it, you're spending it by your damn self. So what do you really have? That's the toxicity of all this, right? You don't actually have what I think is the things that make human beings thrive, which are relationships and connections. Right? That's a life well lived from my perspective. So why aren't we advocating that versus this abusing other people piece? So
what's connected to this is I remember an article from years ago that talked about these archetypes of black men. The archetype of the hustler,
yeah,
of the pimp, the things that we kind of, not that all of us do, but some folks in the black community aspire towards, because these are the ones that are kind of given to us we see in like especially black exploitation movies.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, each of them represent a different version of this manosphere that we're talking about. But what the article talked about is that what people find out if you're an OG is that you find out that if you were the hustler or the pimp or whatever archetype that those only lasted only a short amount of time, because one or two things were going to happen. You're going to die, get killed, or you're going to go to jail.
You're going to go to jail.
But if you were going to actually have a life, have a family, friends, and not be living in a wheelchair with a colostomy bag waiting to die, you had to leave those. So if you were a hustler, you had to learn how to become a business person.
That's right. You better pivot.
Like a legitimate business person.
Business person, right.
If you was a pimp and you were about, people and all that stuff, you went into sales or whatever it was, you went into so it was kind of saying, look, there's some value here because there's some skills that you've gathered here. But you got to leave that world because it's not going to last or sustain you over the duration. So yeah, you're going to make some money. And that's why one of the things I noticed, a very small group of them, but there's some of them are making money.
Yes.
And they're getting a lot of attention. They're using this attention economy to their benefit. But what I'm thinking about is once they get past like 30, 35, 40, assuming they even make it that long,
it's a wrap.
They're going to have to switch over, because if it's not them experiencing some negatives, the people around them, like they had that one woman who's like, listen to her boyfriend talk all that nonsense. He's like, that's not how he is at home.
That's right. Blew him up.
He don't talk like that at home.
That's not how he works. And then that was the one, because I was struck by that, because she ended up leaving him.
Yes.
Because he was like, well, we kind of have this open relationship, and she looked at him with the side eye like, I don't know about
open to who.
And then and she's like, I want to be married and I want to have kids. I want to have a family. And like, she's like, he's a good guy off of this. And eventually she's like, this doesn't work for me. And I think that's the piece that seems to be missing. You're exploiting people in situations, but those people in situations have a choice too.
But remember, the people that they seem to be talking to the most are not people even their age. They're people much younger.
Yeah. These are some 20.
They're like pre-incels.
40-year-olds who are pre-incels. Exactly. You're talking to these 14 and 15-year-olds, boys who are trying to figure out what manhood is. And inappropriately, they're glomming onto this thing and this rhetoric that's like, oof. But this is not the world, or how you're going to make it in the world. Behaving in these kinds of ways, it struck me that much of that world was also very white
or white adjacent.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there was two things I was disturbed by. I was disturbed by the mama when she was on the camera, and it didn't seem like she was holding him accountable as much as she could. Because I can promise you, today, if my mom was on live and she heard me going on the internet saying the things he was saying about women, about people of color, about Jewish people, about all the wealth, but also being seen as a crook, my mom would be in my ass so deep.
All up in
I'd be like, first of all, I already had my class exam, mama.
Mama,
get out my ass, please. Right? I can't. If one of my kids was acting this way, I mean, I wouldn't want to abandon them, but I'd be like having some hard conversations. Like, you making a lot of money, I get it, but you over here doing some foul shit in the world.
Right. All good money.
That's not cool.
All money ain't good money. No, and it's not. I mean, and I think, and that's the pieces that I was taking up. I was like, boy, all of this feels like it's men not being accountable. And who's the poster child?
Yeah,
men not
right
being
now.
Country right now. The orange man.
Well, it's like people don't get that the accountability is the whole point behind the freedom of speech, right?
Absolutely.
Is that, yes, we can speak our minds, and in other worlds, in other parts of the country, we don't get to speak. So let's enjoy this freedom of speech.
That's right.
But they're using it when they think there's no accountability. You should be held. And I think that's the privilege of money, of whiteness, of whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, come on, be realistic.
Right.
The whole point of having consequences is, to be honest, if no one's pushing back behind my nonsense, how can I, one, take care of myself? Because what we're seeing is actually some real toxicity and people who are unwell. And
Yes.
over a period of time, that's going to take a toll on them.
On them. Yeah.
And that's why you have to push back. It's really about sustaining yourself and some well-being being maintained.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's the part that's missing in the conversation.
It is, because I mean that kind of unboundedness um, is, and you said it so well. Being unbounded is unhealthy. It actually destroys you. I mean, substance abuse and a lot of these ills are in many ways they stem from whole lots of things, but that excess is an unboundedness that eventually, for most people, ends up getting them. They die. Whether it's overdose or at the hands of folks in the drug world, whatever. I say this. You probably say this all the time too. Too much of anything is a bad thing.
Yes.
Right? It never works to the good, and so we all need, as a bounded being who exists within society, we've got to be able to have some boundaries, and there should be some things, like the Ten Commandments say, that suggests here are some bounds of our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And if we
Hey,
live
I
with,
want to transition because our time is running short.
yeah,
Yeah, and so I'm glad we got to all the topics, varying degrees, but I think we did cover the
yeah,
great rebrand era. We touched on the birthright citizenship, which is
right,
I really would be surprised if they support the president's position on it, but that's another thing. And I'm really glad we touched on this manosphere. And if we want to come back to that, I think we
yeah,
can, because I think there's a lot
absolutely,
there to be unpacked. But before we get to the gender non-affirming care for Colorado, I want to do one more card if we do quickly. This one is in the past, I've been quick to judge blank. I've been quick to judge blank. And I'll go real quickly. In the past, I'll be honest, I have been quick to judge um, in a lot of different situations, to be honest, because I just see the situation and I'm like, oh, snap. And there's been, particularly what comes to mind for me is, I hate to admit this, but I'll run up on someone who maybe looks like they're unhoused or something like that, and I'm thinking, they're gonna say something crazy. They got some mental health stuff going on. And I remember one time, this dude is a white dude. His hair is in this like big old lock.
okay,
he didn't smell so great, and I thought, man, his dude's gonna say something crazy. I mean,
mm-hmm.
and then he started talking. We had a 15-20 minute
Oh my
conversation.
God,
We were talking about politics. We were talking about the city of Austin. We
mm.
had this great
Okay,
conversation. I don't know why or how he got to where he was, but I had to challenge my own assumptions about
yeah,
this brother, because here I am thinking he's unhoused, and I think I know in my head I
right,
know unhoused people are diverse,
sure.
but in the moment it was nighttime. I was like, I don't know who
I know.
this
All
motherfucker
right, what's
is,
this gonna
but
be?
is he gonna ask me for money? Blah, blah. Nothing like that came up. He was just like, "How's your day going?" I said, "Oh, it's going pretty well. Yeah, it's kind of hot today. Yeah, it's kind of hot. And this city, I don't know where it's going." 20-minute conversation.
Mm,
And so when I got in the car, I was like,
yeah.
there I go, making assumptions and judgments. So for you, in the past, you've been quick to judge blank.
I am really quick to judge um, pretty much all professionals, doctors, lawyers, psychologists, because I find them all. My experience is like they're all super arrogant, know-it-alls, and I'm like, all right, here this motherfucker go. I'm like gonna be telling me about everything and gonna tell me about what I know, and I'm like, and I'm already instantly irritated. Um, Although most of the time it's warranted because that's exactly what they do. But every once in a while, there is somebody who's like one of the downest cats I know is a lawyer, corporate lawyer. Dude is brilliant. I mean, he brother, from the Bay. I mean, this dude, like every time I talk, I love talking to him because he drops knowledge all the time. You know what I mean? From Miles to Jay-Z and anything in between, and on any topic. Like he's just super well read and informative. But he becomes my rare exception to the professional class um, that always thinks they're super brilliant, and it says crazy stuff.
It is kind of frustrating. I remember I ran into this physician, and he was talking all this anti-Semitic nonsense, and
Mm-hmm.
he was talking from a position of authority because he's a doctor.
Because he's a
And
doctor.
I'm like, doctor of these nuts. That's what you're a doctor of. I was so annoyed with that dude.
Right.
And he's highly educated, and he probably went to Harvard,
Exactly. Right. You're like,
and just saying the
educated
most
fool.
idiotic nonsense
Educated
about Jewish
fool.
people.
You know.
The Jews this and the Jews. I'm like, shut up.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. He's like, no, I don't. You know.
So let's get to this topic, man. This was a hard one, and this is about the gender non-affirming care that was in Colorado. This is
Mhm.
about that conversion therapy that was
Right.
basically pretty popular, primarily in really conservative, mostly
Yep.
religious spaces.
Yep.
They said yesterday there was only like 1,300 of clinicians across the country who actually practice this form of therapy. And Lawrence and I have been, who are or have been therapists, and so you probably have done your research.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I learned when I was doing research on conversion therapy is that the question came up of, you get past the politics and the hurt feelings people have around this idea. The question I had is it effective?
Is it effective?
And they found out there was a 0.02% effective level.
Or in common, this shit don't work.
It's basically is about as good as a placebo.
Right.
As far as effectiveness is concerned. And so I was really pleased. I don't know about you, but I was pleased when states started saying, hey, this is illegal, because it wasn't seen as a viable treatment modality to create change.
Exactly.
It was actually harming people.
It was harming.
Right? And so that was the point behind it. But you tell me if you learned more. What I learned about the case yesterday, because they even had a couple of the so-called liberal progressive who got on board, not so much in the same way as the conservatives, but it became an issue of freedom of speech. And for the more progressive justices, they were saying maybe the law in Colorado specifically needs to be adjusted because it was too vague in how it approached the prohibiting conversion therapy, because it impacted freedom of speech. And I'm like, okay, I get that part.
Yeah.
But it was still hard, because I'm like, people are being harmed by this.
They're being
this
harmed.
Approach.
And look, I'm a big Ketanji Jackson fan, Brown Jackson fan, because I think her argument for why in dissent she voted the way she did, I think was, in a nutshell, made the case. She's like, we aren't, basically, we aren't in the business of regulating, or we don't want to get into the business of regulating medical decisions. And she's like, this isn't a free speech case. And I actually think she was right. It's like, you've convoluted two arguments. You're making it a free speech argument when it really isn't. They aren't speaking. And I think this Supreme Court in particular has done this on a pretty consistent basis. So I will say the conservatives have been very consistent in making spurious free speech arguments in lots of places where I believe they don't belong. But in this case, you're talking about a medical or psychological treatment. That's not speech. Speech is the florist who's like, I'm against gay marriage. Well, speak to gay marriage. But again, I agree. You still should have had to make them damn flowers. But if you don't believe in gay marriage, that's free speech. Forming this act in your business. I'm like, okay, because to me, I'm like, oh, so you could turn around and be like, I don't like black people, so I'm not going to serve black customers. Because we had that in this country, right? And this argument around that she made was, look, this is a medical decision. And we've continued to erode the sanctity of the doctor-patient privilege. Now, where I'll sort of double track on what I said, which is, if you as a patient decide you want to go to somebody for conversion therapy, even though it don't work, I suppose you should have the ability to do that.
Right.
I don't know why you'd want to, but okay, if that's a choice that you made, and I don't know that that was this case, because it would seem to be this therapist was like, I'm going to do this. This is my stance. But why is the court in the business of regulating this in this kind of way, especially when we know that it's an ineffective therapy? And basically that's what she was saying. The liberals, just dumbfounded by why they sort of agree with it. And I appreciate what you're saying. Um, and I'm like, I don't know how you got this to be a free speech issue without looking at the merits of the context. I mean, isn't context supposed to be what we're thinking about in terms of the Supreme Court and some of the decisions that they make? I mean, context matters.
It does. My hope is that the two justices who had different, like a bit different decision, they will give some guidance because it's not a guarantee, slam dunk that all the other states' laws will be overturned because of this decision. Because it was really about the therapist's ability to share this information. Because they said
Right.
there are viable places where this could be a conversation because you do have people, rightly or wrong, who, let's say they're they're gay, but they don't want to live that life for
That's right.
religious reasons or other reasons, and so they're trying to figure out, hey, I want to find a wife, I want
Right.
to have kids, I want to do all the traditional things, and so maybe this is a modality, but to me
Right.
that wouldn't be conversion therapy.
No.
That's me saying, hey, I'm gay and I know I
Right.
have these feelings and
Yeah.
stuff, but that's not the life I want to live for these
That's right.
reasons. But so how can I? That's not conversion. That's just saying I'm gay and I want to do this other life, which
Exactly.
people do right now as we
All the
speak
time.
without therapy.
Exactly.
And so, but conversion therapy specifically was a modality to get people to not be gay.
To not be gay, right?
And it was harmful because they were basically using religion along
Yeah.
with therapy like kind of techniques to diminish that part of who they were, where that was leading to suicide. So when you looked at effectiveness, as we typically look at when you're looking at from therapy, is how much of this is actually helping and how much of this is harming. And what you saw by just huge degrees, people were being harmed far more than any potential benefit they may came out of it. And then this is the other part.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Please finish.
No. The other part is that for a lot of this conversion there is happening with underage kids who don't have a choice in these matters. So we're not even talking about adults.
Yes.
We're talking about kids for the most part.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No. I'll double stamp on where you're at. I think the court in lots of these decisions, is on the wrong side, and I think we'll be on the wrong side of history. But the thinking to how they're getting to their conclusions also don't really flow and follow and make sense. It's sort of they're creating solutions from some belief system that they a priori have that's not really based in the facts of the case. I mean, when they overturned Roe v. Wade, it was the same kind of thing. It's like, on the one hand, this was, you're saying stare decisis exists, and then you sort of throw that out with the baby in the bathwater. Then you're like, well, it's a states' rights question. There's just an inconsistency I find with this court. And this to me is a decision that doesn't really look at the downstream implications of and impacts that this has for real people in real lives, and it's going to create harm. We're seeing that, we're seeing that in the abortion decision. It's creating harm. We're going to see this in this conversion therapy decision, I think, down the line, where it creates more harm. And then when they get sued, the conversion therapist gets sued, as well they should, for causing somebody's death. Then they're going to cry something else. I mean, because you can't cry with free speech when the treatment modality that you use caused somebody to die.
Exactly, and again, that's accountability, right?
That's accountability.
People have to be held accountable for their decisions. And if you want to adopt this as an approach, but you have to deal with the consequences as well. Right. And I think that's the whole thing. Again, this idea that you shouldn't have to deal with the consequences. Well, the information was right there. It showed you it was harming people, and you chose to do.
Right.
So they get all kinds of side eye, as far as I'm concerned. They get all the side eye. But hey, you got 2 more minutes, because I want to do our kind of close out with our celebration card. I feel like we had some tough, heavy topics today, but we strong enough. We can handle it.
Right. Oh, by the way, go. Sorry, I just had to add that in. Go Illini.
You had to add that.
More people. Let's root for the Fighting Illini.
Illini. Ragged ass.
Okay. You know what? I was like, I'm looking at this. I was like, I don't know that a black man really looks good in orange. I was like, I don't know, like.
Well, wait, who's in the Final Four for the men? It's Illini. Who else?
Illinois is playing UConn, and Michigan is playing Arizona.
Arizona, right? And the women, I'll be honest. I know Texas. Texas is playing. They're number one. But I think South Carolina.
South Carolina is playing UConn.
UConn.
Texas is playing UCLA.
Okay. There should be some good games.
There should be some good games.
Yeah,
I'm rooting for South Carolina and my girl Dawn Staley. Come on, Dawn, let's do the business.
I have to say I am too. I mean,
it's hard for me to root for.
The thing is, Texas is really good, and they have some great players on their team. Great. So it's not for disliking them.
Maddie Booker is like, she for real.
Yeah. Like, so we should see some good, at minimum, good games and some wings and a glass or two of beer.
Or two. I'm not gonna get off that.
So last one, I spoke my truth when blank. I spoke my truth when. You want to go first?
Sure. I spoke my truth when I said I want the Illini to win the national championship, man. That's my truth.
We're all allowed to have our own truth, even if it looks like a lie. Today I spoke our truth when I was really expressing my frustration about the manosphere conversation we're having. Because I'll be honest, the way I was feeling and how I'm still feeling is that I was watching that brother, the one who was biracial. Yeah, I actually felt a lot of pain for him because I'm like, bro, you've been pain. Yeah, and you don't even know it. And I'm gonna trust you're gonna find your way out of this because you're in the deep in it. But I guess I'm reflecting on just the truth I was experiencing as we were having that conversation because we're kind of animated and calling it toxicity and stuff. Yeah, but under all that is a real concern and worry. Yeah, not just for him. I don't know him from a whole while, but from all the people I know in my life. Right. This is actually going to harm them.
Who are buying into and believing that those kinds of ideas, and we talked about this maybe in my first episode with you. And a lot of those behaviors create harm in our community, and so. Whatever we want to label it or not label it, I'm concerned about the mass of Black humanity. And so to speak our truth is to say, regardless of label, these behaviors are creating harm.
They're hurting people.
They are toxic to Black and brown families. And so let's hope to create an alternative. Talk to that. Maybe that's what we need to talk about. Like, well, what's the alternative to the manosphere? I'm like,
you know what? That probably is a good conversation because I think there's a reason why some men who've joined that space for I think reasonable, important things that I think get ignored. Yes, and so let's make that a topic for us for next time. Expand the conversation. Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Riffing While Black. Here we are again, Dr. Lawrence James and myself. Thank you so much, and. Go Illini.
Illini. Oh, yeah, bro. You did it. I appreciate you.
All right, bro. It's good seeing you. See you next time, all right?
Peace.